Hello, folks. Welcome to This Week in History with Mike and Will. I'm Mike.
I'm Will.
And as you know, every week we look at something in history, and Will explains it to me.
Yep.
And he has 1 hour to explain it to me.
Yeah.
This week is the July 4th week, and so we picked the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
Before we do that, a couple of things of business we need to do. Deal with. One is, well, actually, from last week's.
God, the well, actually.
Ned
Ned Kelly.
Last stand, Ned Kelly. We did get a rather lengthy comment on one of our videos.
Yep.
Pretty much refuting everything that we said in the video.
Yeah.
I've not actually read the whole thing.
I did.
It was a diatribe. And we thank you for whoever you are for
Yep.
putting
Don't
in
know
the
the
effort.
person.
It does strike me, though, in general, that history is written by the winners, and in this case, there was no winner. Therefore, there are two sets of history. One seems to be the Ned Kelly side. One seems to be the cop side.
It's like a pair of trousers. It just depends on which leg you
Sure,
go down.
like a pair of trousers.
Yeah. Sometimes
So,
history's a trousers.
as far as we could tell, our facts that we presented weren't wrong,
No.
but they were not.
It was a different perspective on the same
Let's go with that.
exact event, and
Yeah.
one was more in favor of Kelly, and one not necessarily in favor. I felt like I read the entire thing,
Sure.
and what he said largely just said, nope, everything he did was bad and wrong, which lacks any kind of nuance. So if you don't have a lot of, and this is just my take on what he said, I'm sure that there is a greater deal of nuance. He seems to have read a lot on it,
Sure.
and be well studied into it. But Erica is also a huge history expert on this subject. She came in knowing stuff, reading stuff, doing her research. So I'm not going to disparage one party or the other, but his argument didn't talk about like family issues, societal issues, things like that. It talked about like strict legalities, and then there were some times where he split hairs. Like at the end, Erica said a bunch of police officers were fired, and he said, well, only 4 police officers were fired, and one of them technically resigned. It's like, well, that's more than what happens a lot of the time, so that's still a bunch. I would say 4 is a bunch.
Regardless, we like to engage in conversation. We like to know what's going on.
It was good to hear from people because
It
it
is
wasn't
good to
just
hear back.
he wasn't swearing. He just said this. That was great.
Healthy
We liked
discourse is always
that.
encouraged.
Yeah, definitely.
And we are by no means the be-all and end-all experts on anything. We're just presenting what we have heard
Correct.
and the knowledge we know. If you have different knowledge or a different view on things, let us know.
Yeah,
We'd love to hear
definitely.
from
We
you.
love hearing that. It just, keep it civil like he did. He kept it very civil. He didn't attack her character.
Yep.
He went after the argument.
Just-
That's wonderful. Do that. We love to hear that. That was good. That's a good thing.
And I'm
right?
sure we may get a comment or two on this one. We'll find out.
Maybe, probably.
Second order of business before we start is we got this lovely plate of zucchini bread that Will brought in today.
I went to Lock, Stock, and Bagel in Green Bay. I'm going to make them... I have to start telling all these coffee shops that
Yeah.
we have this show, and we talk about the coffee places. We give shout-outs to our
should let them
favorite.
know,
I should
yes.
probably talk about that.
That's how-
I don't know if we get money from it, but maybe we'd get coffee from it.
Hey, I'd go with free coffee. That'd be fine.
I'd be fine with that. Plus, I live a block away from there now, so free coffee every day.
All right, I've been very generous with
Thank you.
the hour, and this one I feel we could go on for a long time.
We
so
could,
we're going to
but
be strict about the hour
got-
because last time they went way over.
That was my fault.
That was your fault.
That was my fault.
So right now, let's dive into some American history and the Declaration of Independence.
Junk. I think that's copyright.
Hit it.
All right. The Declaration of Independence. That is a document that
Yep.
was created by what are known as the Founding Fathers of the United States of America. And what it is a totally non-legally binding document. This is not a matter of law.
Sure.
This is just the colonies said, we're mad at you, so we're done. We're
Yes.
out. It's like, filing for divorce, minus needing a lawyer. In this case, you need guns. Because typically, you don't do that.
Well, they didn't want to stop being in charge of us, right?
Right. Yeah. They're not like, okay, fine, yeah, this is a pretty good document. We
Not a
like your
fan.
reasons
All
why.
right.
I suppose, King George, what do you think? Let them go. This is a long
good.
time coming, and this doesn't start the revolution. The revolution has already started.
Oh.
It's been going on, and even having this Congress is treason.
Oh.
It is in full violation of British law. But we're going to get into the concept of treason because when I say treason, that is a perspective thing. Ben Franklin talked about this a lot, and we're going to talk about Ben Franklin, who many regard as the first American or the greatest American. I largely agree.
Okay. He
Although
always seemed like a nice guy to me.
he did, although at one point he did own people, but then showing a good thing, character development, he also started the first abolitionist society and freed any slaves that he had and fought for the rest of his life to end slavery, and he was very, very passionate about it. So
Good on you, Ben.
this is people going, oh, well, you know, at the time people were pretty much okay with it. No, they weren't.
I'm
And
pretty sure-
Franklin went, yeah, this is probably wrong.
I'm pretty sure the slaves weren't okay with
The
it
slaves
either.
were definitely not. Yeah, I think they were sitting there like, these chains are nice. I get a workout every time I walk with
Has
them.
anyone asked the slaves?
I get to pick cotton all day. It's a glorious time.
I have now to go back away from the slavery for a moment.
Oh, that's good.
A question on basically on the founding fathers.
Yep.
There's always got a vague part here. How were they chosen to go to
Congress.
Yeah. How were they like?
This is an interesting thing. So, every colony basically runs like its own tiny country,
Yeah.
which nowadays you get a lot of these people talking about that, like that's how it's supposed to be. That's not how it's supposed to be as of the founding of the United States. This changed. But like Pennsylvania had a president, one of whom was Benjamin Franklin.
Oh.
They didn't have kings or anything like that, but they had their own state assemblies, much like we do today. These people are largely picked by landowners, so you had to have property. There are no people of color and there are no women, so this is all white men with money.
Right.
Okay? Not super different than today, because you don't see poor politicians. Like
True.
you see like two. There was like one who was a bartender,
It's true.
and then now she's not.
It is difficult to run on the national scale for sure.
It's super
without
different.
anyone.
Yeah, you can definitely get it more locally, like at the alderman level. But even back then, you could not. You had to own land.
Yeah.
Like you had to have land. You had. If you did not have land, you did not get voting rights. That was pretty much an established thing. Now, also because it's a British colony, they don't really actually have any authority because the British government can just come in and say nope.
No.
They treated the colonies like below second-class citizens, and that was the only place they did that. In other places, like I mean, not to say like in India they treated them, better.
Yeah.
But these were white European settlers, and they were treated like they didn't matter.
Any other colony that?
Yeah, and all these other colonies, like in Canada, it was not treated like that.
Oh.
They were treated differently in the States, and it was largely because there was this kind of most of the people who went there more adventurous, more pushing outward. They left these countries to get away from kind of the European style of rule.
Okay.
They wanted to start over, and they started to create a new breed of people, a new concept, a new nation, almost like a new ethnicity, which is what we have today, where it's like each country has kind of its own ethnicity, its own what makes Britain British,
Like
what
personality,
its
if
own
you will.
personality. I feel like ethnicity probably isn't the proper term
Yeah.
for it, but nationality,
Identity.
identity.
Yeah.
It has its own cultural identity.
Sure.
Again, Franklin talked about this, that we're a new nation, we're rougher, simpler, less refined, more violent, more entrepreneurial.
Check.
Yeah, it's like,
We
okay,
still are.
yep. That checks all the boxes. It's like if you dumb it down and make it rougher, simpler, less concerned about, proprietary this and that. Trying new things, though, that was a big part of it.
Yeah.
And Britain was very much, we have a king, you follow the king, nobody cares what you say,
And we
you have
have-
landed nobility.
But also, we have 1,000 years of history.
Yeah, that
that
was a
we've been
big
following.
part of it. Is this is an ancillary state. This is you are like a toe, like an extra toe on a foot.
Yeah.
We already have the foot. We don't actually need. Like they treated the colony like it really didn't matter after a while. It was making money,
Yeah.
which is good for the empire, but it wasn't their big concern. And Britain is also the world power at this time.
Gotcha.
Britain is the world superpower. They make the Roman Empire look weak. They can go anywhere. The sun at this point, this is when the concept of the sun never sets on the British Empire. This is when they're reaching out everywhere. They have these massive warships that just can't be stopped. They have a population of about 10 million people on the islands, whereas the colonies, which are much larger, have about 2 million people.
Ooh, spread out.
Now the problem is, Britain also has, like you said, 1,000 years of history, and it's not all great. So like they do not get on with France. They're at war with France
All the time.
all the time. They just finished a war with France that was called the 7 Years' War, or here we called it the French Indian War.
Can we have another war with France? You haven't finished your first war.
Yes, you finish your first war, or you don't get up from this table and start another war. It's very much that too. And even when they were at peace, it was like, well, so we shot some Frenchmen today. Oh, jolly good. Does it count as a war? No, because it happened in the colonies. It was fine. Ha Oh, well, we hired some pirates, but they're not pirates. They work for us, but they sunk some French ships. Ha And the French were like, but we sunk some English ships. Call it the English Channel. It's touching France too. It is our channel, and we'll fight over the name.
I've never heard of any French ships.
Yep.
Carry on.
The French never had boats.
I'm sure they had a boat.
They had one.
We only have one
You hear
boat.
about the Spanish Armada, you hear about the English Navy. You never hear about the French Navy,
have
which
one
probably makes the French Navy really mad.
I suppose.
They're probably really irritated. We have boats. We have like coast all over the place. We're in the
the
Mediterranean.
stripy shirt and the hat
The
with
hat.
little, yeah.
We're stylish. It's like what we talked about when there was the pirates in the Mediterranean.
little neckerchief.
Remember the Mediterranean?
Yeah.
And we talked about the Knights of Malta. It was the two Frenchmen just sitting on the hill watching the battle. Look, the Spanish are killing the Moors. This is nice. Look at this
We
view.
have strayed away from this topic.
No, but the French are very important to this because this is one of the reasons why they needed a declaration, was to let the world know we're mad and we're done, and this is why.
I'm not going to take it anymore.
So England at the time is ruled by a fellow named George III.
George.
King George III. He is famous for being nuts later on in life. After this, there was a play called The Madness of King George, which is about him.
Yeah.
They're not really sure what the madness was, and there's a theory that maybe it started affecting him even when he was younger, before they understood it.
Okay.
But it could have been a bipolar disorder that just made him that got worse as he got older, which can happen if it's not treated.
Do you think losing America may have factored in?
That is actually thought to be a huge factor of what made him break later, because
if you're on the edge and
Yeah.
then you suddenly lose.
well, at the time, so George he's a monarch. This is not. We don't understand monarchy in this country because we this is literally why we don't understand it. It's because of today's what we're talking about. But you need to understand going into this that this guy is born to kingship and believes that it is his divine right. And this is a time when religion is not questioned. There are not a lot of agnostics, not in Britain.
Yeah.
And also as divine right, and because of the Church of England, he's also the head of their church. So he's the equivalent of the Pope and the King. He's the temporal and divine authority of his kingship, and he believes all of his subjects are his children.
Well, I'm sure this will not affect someone's mental health at all.
Not even a little. No, you can't have that kind of weight thrust upon your shoulders. You're in charge of 10 million Britons and Irish and Welsh and the Scots and also the colonies and then all of our other colonies, and they are yours and you own them. And that's how he sees it.
Yeah.
Is all the land is his because God gave it to him. All the people owe him obedience because of God. And it's also interesting because like his family background is not English. They're German.
Oh.
But they got married into the family. So he is like this German Englishman. It's a very weird. I think it was the first George was actually like Georg. Or he was German. He was like straight up pure German. So this guy is a descendant from like Germans who came in.
Well, Lord works in mysterious ways.
It's really complicated. But yeah, somehow that made him have divine authority. Not years of inbreeding and having a family tree that's just a straight line. So that's also a possibility.
I said he also kind of lucked into the job.
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
Okay.
He didn't do anything to become king. His parents made a baby. I don't even think he was the eldest son. I think his brother died, and then he became king. I have to do more research on King George III. He's not, for our foreign friends watching this now, King George III is not particularly well liked in the United States. He is referred to as a tyrant, as Fat George, as all these horrible, nasty things throughout history because we see him as the big bad in the War of Independence.
Yes. Well, we'll talk about it later. He'll be back.
What's interesting about He'll Be Back, You'll Be Back, that's a great song. It's a great song.
Yeah.
That's a great song. That should play. But I think
We can if you want this video to be silenced.
yeah, if we get sued into oblivion, Lin-Manuel Miranda shows up. Did you?
I think they just silent it.
I think they just-
I don't
yep,
think
no.
they will bother suing.
I don't think they'd
us.
bother. Like, you can have the $4 we have. Look at the wall. There's not even a wall.
Can't afford a wall.
We can't afford paint. Don't sue us. We can't even get funding for coffee. So anyway, George III, though, he's not particularly belligerent, though.
Okay.
He just kind of has this view that, well, no, this is how it is.
Yeah.
This is how Dad did it. This is how Granddad did it.
It's how we've
This is
always done it.
everybody in Europe does it. I'm the king. Just listen to me.
Yeah.
The problem largely comes from Parliament. Parliament has this very aggressive view towards the United States, which is interesting because at the time, the Americans didn't have a very negative view of Parliament. They put all the blame on the king, much like nowadays. If you have inflation, it's the president's fault.
Oh, yeah.
If there's a war, it's the president's fault. I stubbed my toe. Stupid president.
I feel like that's why we pick a president.
You pick a guy to blame.
Yeah.
You pick a person to, like, that's really their responsibility, just to be the red light that blinks and you yell at it, okay? So it's easier to blame the king rather than blame a series of systemic and generational issues that have caused this problem. Because the king does not rule without Parliament's say-so. He has a lot of power, he has a lot of wealth, he can help get people into Parliament, but unless he's actively pursuing all of that, he doesn't have sole authority. Britain is a very firm constitutional monarchy. He rules with divine right, but he has a privy council of experts, lawyers, doctors, landed nobility, no poor people. Again, anytime we talk about this right now, I'm sorry, but we're poor people, and poor people, we don't matter.
Look, if we wanted
Historically.
your opinion, you'd have more money.
Exactly. And that's another thing that sticks in the craw of the U.S., well, the colonists, is they aren't nobles.
No.
So because they're not nobles, they don't have nobility, they're garbage people.
Yeah.
Like, they don't even recognize them. Like, the English show up and they've got lords and knights and such, and the colonists don't have that. They don't have, like, landed nobility. They have gentry, who are wealthy people who own it, and it's basically the same thing. It just doesn't have the years and years, the 1,000 years of history. So George is kind of sit up on his throne, and Parliament does its thing, and they make the rules. Now, I'm gonna check my notes because I want to get this guy's name right. 'Cause
Sure.
It's just stupid. So there are a few issues that lead up directly into this, okay? So the first English colony was in Jamestown in Virginia.
Yes.
I believe it was 1604. And that's an episode by itself. Jamestown has a very fascinating history. It's usually not great. This is where, like, John Smith was in the Pocahontas story.
Yeah.
And that's a very complicated story where it was, fighting but trying to reach a peaceful settlement a lot of the time. And these are a lot of our earliest encounters. As it progresses, England winds up controlling all of the coastline from Florida up till New York, and
Alright.
New Hampshire and Vermont and all those.
Maine?
Maine is not a state yet. No
Forget
Maine.
you, Maine.
There's Rhode Island. There's I should probably have written down the 13 original colonies, but there's 13 of them right now, and each one, like I said, governs itself in its own fashion. They have different laws, different rules about different things. They also have, because of this, different cultural things about what they accept, what is acceptable to them. And the most troublesome colony for Britain is Massachusetts. Boston, in particular, is seen as, like, the problem. That's the capital of Massachusetts. And it is seen as, like, where trouble goes to start.
Boston.
Now, what happens, there's different...
It's still a troubled city.
It's still a troublesome. Go to Boston and say something nasty about the Red Sox and just watch yourself get beaten down into nothingness by, like, a 5-year-old. They all just carry around, like, socks full of batteries and beat people up. That's Boston. Don't mess with Boston. They have a long history of, hey, kid, get out of here. But at this time, though, Boston is home to a lot of very educated people, a lot of lawyers, and the firebrands of the revolutionaries start in Boston because Boston is a massive port city.
Yeah.
So a huge amount of trade coming from Britain goes through there, which means that's where they have all their big customs houses. Now, they have these in, like, Charleston and along the coast, but Boston's kind of the big one. It's the easiest shot from England and it's a robust port. New York is the other one, but Boston starts getting cracked down on, and the people start getting angry about this because of how Parliament perceives the colonies as lesser citizens. Colonists start to bristle at this, especially in the bigger cities, but particularly in Boston. They don't like that. They don't like being told this is how it's going to be by somebody who lives thousands of miles away. It takes them weeks to get there, and they have no idea what it's like living in America. A lot of these people are first or second generation immigrants. They've worked hard. They didn't show up with $1 gajillion to start everything. They had to work. So they have a different work ethic, with different perspective. Now, there were plenty of people who did not work their way up, who showed up with cash in hand. That's also a thing. There are landed families like the Lees.
That is probably the best way to be rich, is just to start.
Just to start that
being
way.
rich.
Yeah, it's really easy to be rich when you're born to it.
Have you thought about just being rich?
Have you thought about being born rich? Why don't you have better parents? Why didn't your parents work hard?
Done that, you would be good.
I worked so hard to be rich because mom and dad were rich and gave me the company. I'm just like you, though. Are you, though?
Oh, rich.
So then you have guys like Ben Franklin, who is going to get talked about a bunch more in this because he's one of my idols. I love Ben Franklin. I know. That's why I'll do a whole episode on Ben Franklin. Actually, we should get my brother to come in and talk about Ben.
Okay.
There we go. He'll need 6 hours, and I'll tell him dial it down to 1. But Ben Franklin, though, is a great example of a guy who started out as an apprentice, which is basically like he got given to somebody else.
Oh.
And then the family had to pay him to go to this thing and learn a trade.
Okay.
And then he learned print.
Yeah.
He was a typist. Well, this is a time where type is blocks of iron.
Yeah.
So he's carrying around 50 pounds of iron with him everywhere he goes. So Ben Franklin got to be a very large guy when he was younger. He was big. That's why he was very large and later in life. Is he started out being big and burly, and then just kind of expanded after that. But he took all of his knowledge and then he opened his own print shop. Then he took apprentices, and rather than charge them for it, he just said, stay in contact with me, and then he would help set up their print shops up and down the colonies. So by the end of it, he was at the center of all the news.
Ben's a thinker.
He didn't control it. He just said, keep me informed. I want to know everything that goes on.
As far as you know, he didn't control it.
As far as you know. He could have been the first name whoever everybody thinks controls the world now. I always think of So I Married an Axe Murderer. There's the Pentaveret who control the world, and they meet in the meadows, and it's run by all these horrible people. But so Ben Franklin was very much a self-made man. He started poor, worked his way up to being one of the richest people in the colonies, definitely the most famous. He created the stove. He created the lightning rod. He was the first postmaster.
Invented the kite.
I don't think he invented the kite, but he used the kite to figure out how electricity worked.
Yeah.
Very smart guy. Now, Ben Franklin believes very much that the colonies are growing and they are changing.
Yes.
And they are changing at a rate where they are not eventually going to be viable as a British colony.
Oh.
They're going to have to be their own place. But he thinks that this is a long way off.
Okay.
He thinks
change comes slowly.
Comes slowly, and maybe somewhere down the road this will happen. Now, he starts to see things amp up in Boston. He's a Pennsylvania man, but he's got friends everywhere. And he sees that things are getting a little tense. So his idea is to speak to Parliament to try to make sure that this gets calmed down.
Okay, take it down, Parliament.
He's like, I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to them. This is a thing that is kind of built up in England because they're like, well, Ben Franklin, he represents America. He's this big mover and shaker. He was the president of Pennsylvania. Everybody knows Ben Franklin. That's fine. And Parliament largely thinks he's going to come and he's going to speak, say, don't oppress the colonies.
Stop it.
Let's just take a step back because things are going to get worse.
Yeah.
Well, the Solicitor General, who's basically the king's lawyer, or he might be Parliament's lawyer.
Okay.
I'm not positive. His name is Alexander Wedderburn.
Okay.
Wedderburn. He invites Franklin to speak publicly in front of the Privy Council, which is the king's elite experts in everything. That's like talking to the cabinet. of the United States government.
Invites him to do that in
in
England?
Parliament. Yeah, and he
Oh,
says,
so-
while you're here, you come talk to us, talk
Come
to
on
the
by.
king, talk to everybody.
This is great. That sounds like a great opportunity, Ben.
It's a great chance for Ben to plead his case as
Sure.
arguably the smartest guy in the colonies, and probably at that time the majority of the European-styled world that we know of. Ben Franklin is. I can't think of somebody smarter than him. And he's liked by, everybody likes him. He's
Yeah.
even popular in England. They like him in England. They're like, oh, this guy's great. Look at him. He's nice to everybody. He drinks with us. He parties with us. He's as comfortable with a noble as he is with the poorest person. He shakes everybody's hand. He greets everybody. He's just
What a guy.
He's a charming guy. But he's also always the smartest guy in the room. So you can go to him for advice. He's got no ego. He doesn't think, I'm Ben Franklin, I'm better than you. He's a pretty chill, reasonable guy. So they bring him to the Privy Council, and Wedderburn just rips into him for like an hour.
What are you doing, Weatherburn?
He just says, you're a fat, lazy, stupid,
Oh, no, you
poor
didn't.
example of the colonies and their rebellious nature. You're a snake. He just lays into him and tries to assassinate his character.
What's his problem?
He's just a jerk.
Oh.
That's all we can find. Historians, he thought of this as an opportunity to just take the best America had to offer and crush it
Oh, okay.
in front of his buddies.
Classic bully behavior.
Classic bully.
You can't build
behavior.
yourself up, tear the other
Tear
guy
the
down.
other guy down.
Yeah.
And Franklin is, by all accounts, his better in every way. I think he has more money. He's definitely smarter. He's definitely more accomplished personally. This guy's born to wealth, and he thinks, I can just take a dump all over the great man.
It's probably worked for him in the past. I
It
imagine.
probably has, because, British Parliament, those guys are like knives out. They
Yeah.
just go at it. And they're horrible to each other. And then everybody's calm, and then they're like, oh, now let's pass a law. Ha ha! Robin Williams once said Parliament is like the U.S. Congress with a 2-drink minimum.
Oh, that's fun.
It's
Yeah,
fun.
that
It's,
makes sense. Yeah.
it's fun to watch. I bet back then it was worse because people used to beat the heck out of each other.
Oh,
Their
sure.
broken arms and cracked skulls, and
Wow.
you wanted to hire the big guy to be your representative in case there's a row. Go get him!
That's why there were
that's
no women.
McTavish. We love when that guy shows up.
Okay.
So Wedderburn just rips into Franklin, and Franklin just takes it. He's just kind of like, okay. And it's I picture the Franklin image on the $100 bill of that kind of almost like a Mona Lisa smile,
Yes.
and he basically nods and smiles, says thank you for your visit, and thank you for having me here. I'm going back to the States.
Goodbye.
And he's changed. He goes back thinking, yeah, there's not going to be a reconciliation.
Really? Just because that one guy?
Because that guy is so awful to him, and everybody laughed. Everybody thought it was funny. They shamed him, and he's like, if they're willing to do that to me,
Yeah.
and this is how they feel about the colonies, that we don't even matter to them. It was very eye-opening for him to see.
Sure.
That. So he went home with a different ideology, basically saying, okay, well, it's got to go faster. So that's Franklin's mindset. Now, he doesn't go out and burn stuff down and start all these fights. He's got other people for that. The colonies already have that. They have
Yeah.
Sam Adams, who's literally a firebrand. He's like, I'll set stuff on fire.
Okay.
Now, at the same time, we have a much more quiet, conservative man named John Adams. John Adams is a lawyer. He's a farmer. Never owned a slave in his life. He is of the first 11 presidents of the United States. He's the only one who didn't own people, which by default makes him better as a person than all the other ones.
Sure.
Just putting that out there. That is an opinion.
Well, let's draw a line.
That's the line. If you own people, you're automatically everybody who didn't own people is above you at
Yep.
some point. Sorry.
That's a good
I'm
line
sorry,
to draw.
Washington.
It's a fine line
It's
to
like
draw.
Washington's the greatest president that owned people. And
Okay.
then there's every president that didn't own people after that.
Yeah,
Once you
okay.
own people, that's where I draw the line.
Sure.
I think that's okay.
I think that's right. That's
Because
good.
at the time, it wasn't acceptable in a lot of circles. John Adams didn't own people. It wasn't that he couldn't. He had plenty of money, eventually, at different times in his life. It wasn't that expensive to buy a slave or 2 slaves. And from there, life gets cheaper and easier. And he had a farm that would have made his life probably way easier. But he thought it was morally reprehensible to own people.
Sure.
It gets more intense for him as he realizes how England treats America.
Oh.
That we are being pushed down and beaten down, and we're going to turn around and own people.
Yeah.
That's hypocritical, to say the least.
Yeah.
And that's something that never changes in him. That's something he fights for the rest of his life.
Okay.
Now, Adams, though, is a big believer in like trial by jury. He is a big believer in the understanding of innocence. He's very famous as saying basically, and this is a horrible paraphrasing, but if I quote everything Adams says, it's going to take 17 years. Because
Sure.
Adams was a brilliant writer, and he kept a very detailed account. He was a diarist. Every day he wrote a lot about basically this is what's going on in my life. He wrote thousands and thousands of letters, especially to his wife, Abigail.
I've heard of
Adams,
that, yeah.
who's
Heard of those.
legendary. She basically shouldered the responsibilities of raising like 8 kids, running a farm, running a family business, taking care of everything, so that he could go off to the Continental Congress to fight for independence, because she knew that she couldn't do that because she's just a woman. But he saw her as his absolute partner in all things.
Oh, okay.
She's his best friend. It's the best love story of the colonies, because it's just these two people who would do anything for each other, and they both have to sacrifice so much because he wants nothing in the world so much as to be with her and his kids.
Wow.
But he believes so strongly in independence.
Yeah.
But his idea is very similar to Franklin's at the beginning as well, that things are really tense, but maybe we can smooth it out. Somewhere down the line,
We'll figure this out. but,
maybe there'll be a split, but we can walk it back. Well, in 1767, there are the Townsend Acts.
Townsend.
The Townsend Acts. There are 5 are usually considered to be the main problems. They're named because the Exchequer of the, I think that's his title, is the Exchequer. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, that's like the Royal Bank.
Okay.
Basically, it not the bank so much as the royal funds. This is where all the money is for the British Crown. So there's the New York Restraining Act, the Revenue Act, the Indemnity Act, the Commissioners of Customs Act, and the Vice Admiralty Court Act. Those are the ones that are kind of considered. And these passed between 67 and 68. And they were like punitive measures against the colonies for things that they did or did not do. So like New York was violently opposed to the quartering of soldiers. The quartering is when British troops are stationed in your home.
Yeah.
You have to provide for them. You don't get any say in this.
Right.
There's just a soldier living with you.
Well, they got to live somewhere.
Yeah,
Will.
that was the thing. It saved the crown money, but it
Yeah.
also prevented any thought of rebellion because you got a trained killer living in your house. And this is the British military. These guys are the finest riflemen in the world at the time. They are one of the most carefully trained and skilled military fighting forces of the time, which means in history there aren't a lot of people that were more respected as far as soldiering goes. But then they started having like mercenaries show up, and the Hessian mercenaries are Germans who were considered particularly brutal. They also didn't speak English, so you've got a bunch of German people living with you, yelling and doing stuff, and you're like, good morning, kids. How was your day? This is the plan, and okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Hessian. Like, there was a lot of tension.
Sure.
New York did not appreciate this.
I wouldn't appreciate
No,
that.
I don't think anybody
Yeah.
would or should appreciate having to have a soldier live in your house.
Yeah.
Where you have to provide food, shelter, take care of them. They like did their laundry and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
there was usually like kind of a. Some of the soldiers try to make it like an amiable thing, like, "Hi guys,
I
it's
guess,
just, I'm friendly."
I'm
But
sure there
you're
are nice
still
soldiers.
not a member of my family, and
Yeah.
I have to have you live here. And I'm a farmer. I'm like a subsistence
This is
farmer.
not a
I
bread
don't
and
have-
breakfast,
I
man.
don't have a tractor. I got 2 cows, a goat. It's enough for my family. You're not even doing yard work. You don't do any of the chores. Why are you in my house? But they had no say in it. So that was probably one of the big breaking points for these people.
Okay.
And soldiers started being quartering because there started to be civil unrest about like the Stamp Act, which was a tax to use stamps.
Yes.
Every time you used a stamp, you had to pay money. So you couldn't send anything unless you gave the British money. The British basically wanted to find a way to fund the colonies with taxes so that every single coin that came out of the colonies was pure profit.
Oh, okay.
They didn't have to invest any more time,
Sure.
effort, or money into it.
We've
They
been-
just take.
Yes, we've invested enough. It's
We've
time
invested
for
enough.
now,
We
you
sent
guys.
out all the riffraff we don't want anymore.
Time to get a return now.
Give us money.
Right.
Then they started doing things like setting up that any governors, which were appointed by the crown, judges, and other like officials were paid by Britain.
Oh.
which means they're beholden to the crown. So
Sure.
let's say this quartered soldier who lives in your house violates your daughter, and you go to the judge, who's paid for by Britain.
Oh.
And the only lawyer you can get costs a bunch of money or has a really good heart and is like, yeah, I'll take up your case, but now they have to fight the crown.
Yeah.
And they're going to rule in the crown's favor because they also get to pick the jury.
Yeah.
In Massachusetts, eventually they rescind the right to a trial by jury,
Oh, that's
which is really bad.
yeah. That's a bad sit.
And especially in our country
bad
right now,
sign.
where like that's a founding principle, is a trial by jury.
Yeah.
Which is huge for John Adams. So John Adams is in all of this. He's seeing all this stuff happen. It's building up. It's building up. He knows it's bad. He lives in Boston, so
Yeah.
he sees all of this firsthand. And in 1770, on March 5th, a single British soldier is on patrol, and the crowd starts to harass him.
Oh no.
He gets spooked. His buddies see him, and they come to his rescue.
Uh-oh.
There's 8 of them. This turns into a crowd of angry civilians yelling at like 8 soldiers. They start to throw rocks and snowballs at him. Then the crowd turns into hundreds.
Oh.
The soldiers eventually fire into the crowd. They kill 5
Oh.
people. This is the Boston Massacre. One of the first casualties of these is considered like the first casualties of the war.
Yeah, yeah.
This is like considered by some people to be the start. This is when it really started to go from, okay, we're going to smash up some tea and throw it into the river
Blood
because
has
we
been
are sick
shed.
of you two. This, and by this time, like the Boston Tea Party's already happened too, where they smashed up a bunch of tea, threw it in the water. They're like, fine, you're going to tax us to hell and ruin our lives, and we're going to wreck your trade. Meh.
Harumph.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny, like, nowadays you get people going, well, you can't riot when you're mad. Our founding fathers would strongly disagree. It's
Yeah.
kind of like a thing. That's
It-
an American pastime.
It does seem like the thing when you're not being listened to at all. At some point, violence becomes. Well, now you're
Yep.
listening to us, aren't
Yep,
you?
now you're going to listen. Now you're going to listen because
I'm not pro-violence.
I'm not pro-violence. I'm not pro-violence.
but I do I do understand it.
There are times when it happens, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, and these are extenuating circumstances.
Sure.
This is not somebody lost an election, so let's go storm the state house. This is, we are being treated like not even second-class citizens. We don't count.
Right.
Which ironically is how they treat chattel slavery in the South, especially.
Yeah.
So they are, and they come from years of this not being the case, and now they're seeing it all going away. But they're realizing this is what's happening, and now the government is just firing into the crowds of people.
Yeah, it's not good.
Well, at the time, nobody wanted to defend the soldiers.
oh, no.
Good reason.
Yeah.
Like legally, this is F
It
these
does
guys.
seem-
They
it
just
does
shot.
seem- it does
they just
seem,
shot a
rough.
bunch of colonists. John Adams steps up and takes the case because he believes in his heart that all people deserve a trial by jury
Oh.
and deserve to be represented to the fullest extent of the law.
He's defending the.
He defends the soldiers.
Soldiers.
Now, he is a very proud Boston lawyer. He
Yes.
is a smart man. He's a good man. He does not think that it's okay for them to just go and shoot people. But he's like, but I have code. I have a rule. I
Yeah.
believe trial by jury. This does not go away if you're a British soldier. You're here. You're people. You're American for the extent of this.
Yep.
We're dealing with it.
Yes.
He wins.
Oh. Well, he's a
He
good
wins.
lawyer.
He's a really good lawyer. 2 men who were specific, like they could be picked out by the crowd as having fired into the crowd. They were brought on manslaughter charges.
Okay.
So those guys.
Was this to a British judge?
This
though?
was to a judge. I think it was an appointed judge.
And a jury? Was there
and
a
the
jury?
There were some very pro-British
Okay.
guys who, in the end, it turned out they were loyalists. And we'll get into that in a little bit of
Okay.
the difference between like a loyalist, a radical, and then kind of a middle ground.
Sure.
But yeah, so yeah, I know we got time. We're more than halfway done. The last bit doesn't take quite as long.
Okay.
It's all about the preamble.
Sure.
Preamble. I always feel the preamble is like the more important part because it leads into why this thing happens, which is like the preamble to the Declaration, which
Yeah.
we'll read. So Adams defends these guys, and he wins because he believes in this. But then he immediately sees the system start to break down because that's when they start saying, well, the Crown pays judges now.
Yeah.
The Crown owns this, the Crown owns that. And as a lawyer, he's a Harvard graduate, and again, self-made guy.
Yeah.
He's sees the laws changing. So, rules for the colonies, and then the rules for the British.
Yeah.
But if you treat, and then, so the entire parliamentary argument is you are British citizens. Then we get British rights. Well, no, you don't, because you're colonists. Then we don't count as British citizens. And therefore, we're not subject to your rules, legally speaking. So either we are British citizens and we have to deal with everything you say,
Or we're not.
or we're not, and then we don't have to deal with anything you say.
Right.
The parliament disagrees.
Or you're gonna have to make up a new
You're gonna have to change it.
level.
You're gonna have to change it. You're gonna have to change rules, and they refuse. They're just like, no, you're colonists. You're gonna accept what you want. You are British citizens, but you're lesser British citizens, so you don't count. George, through this whole thing, is just kind of like la 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 la. Why don't they understand where I'm coming from? I don't. And he also
have you shown them the crown?
yeah. I have the shiny hat. They have to listen to the shiny hat.
Everyone listens to the shiny
You
hat.
people listen to that shiny hat. Yes, my lord. Yes, your grace. Yes.
This guy's
Nuts. And it really is Parliament starts to crack down. So like this guy, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Townsend, he's the one who was the architect of like these rules. He died before they even happened. But now, 3 years
Take
later,
that.
we have the Boston Massacre, and it starts to build and build and build and build and build. None of this is good.
No.
And eventually the British decide they're going to deal with this through force of arms, because the colonists are going, all right, there's going to be a reckoning.
Yeah.
Like everybody can feel it. There's this sea change after the massacre, especially. Adams, Mr. kind of, maybe we can calm things down, now is going, no. Ben Franklin, the visionaries, like it's seeded in his brain, independence has to happen. But he doesn't talk a lot about it publicly.
Yeah.
That's not his
Seems
thing.
inflammatory.
Thomas Paine comes out, writes Common Sense, which states it's total propaganda, by the way. He's like, we have more people in the colonies than Britain has, which is a flagrant lie. We have more guns than the British has, which is a flagrant lie. We have more money, huge lie. We have more this, so there's tons of propaganda, but it also does say they did this bad thing, they did this bad thing, they did this bad thing. We should be sick of and tired of it. We're our own country. Let's go be our own country. And the only solution is probably fighting.
Thomas Paine, I've heard his name before, and in Common Sense, I've heard that. He's not one of the founding fathers, though. Is he just
No, he's not one of the framers of the
Is
Constitution.
he American?
He is an
Like-
American. He's an American citizen. He's a writer. He's, I believe, a lawyer.
Okay.
But I don't think he was in the Continental Congress.
Okay.
But he was a huge, prolific writer of the time.
Yeah, okay.
So Common Sense is very short. It's a pamphlet. And that was a big way of getting out news. You didn't have emails and tweets and things like that. And especially
same
since it cost $1 bajillion to send anything.
Sure.
Because of the stupid Stamp Act. So they'd print these things out en masse. And again, remember who owns a lot of printing presses? Ben Franklin.
Benny.
Yep. They print these things out and they just hand them out. Read this, read this, read this, read this, read this. And a
way to
lot of
get-
people were literate back then.
Okay.
People could read. People would pick up this thing called a book and they read it and they learn
Ooh.
from it.
Give it a try, kids.
Give it a try, kids. It's a great thing. So it's circulating. Revolution has to happen. The British send over like troops. It's not just like their garrison of a couple thousand troops they've got spread out throughout the colonies. They send a force by ship, 1 if by land, 2 if by sea, that whole thing.
yeah.
There's the famous ride of Paul Revere, which was not actually just Paul Revere, and he's not the one who finished the ride.
Yeah, but we're not talking about that
Not
today.
talking about that today. The British show up. The militia are ready.
Which militia? Our militia?
Our
The
militia.
American
The
militia?
the colonial militia shows up to fight the British.
Yes.
It doesn't go well at first.
Yeah.
The Redcoats are an expert, disciplined mass of troops.
Yes.
They know how to do what's called a pitched battle, which is set pieces facing off against each other. You walk towards each other, you shoot, we have artillery.
Yeah.
They meet on like the village green, which is a big public area, and the Americans like, yeah, we're gonna fight them like they fight, and they routed. Like the British fire like 2 volleys, and they go, oh, this is stupid.
Oh, those guns are
This
loud.
is stupid, and they run.
Yeah.
Well, then the Redcoats like, yeah, we won, and they chase them down, and they rally. The colonists rally, and unload. Now, while they're doing the run, so when the colonists first show up,
This is in Boston?
this is in Lexington and
Lexington
Concord,
and
which
Concord.
is in the Boston area.
Okay.
So Lexington's militia is 77 men. Concord sends 400.
Yeah.
The soldiers leaving now. The British. So it's militia versus soldiers. We don't have soldiers yet.
Right.
All right? The British sent.
We don't even have a well-regulated militia.
No,
yet.
we don't have anything. It's just it's literally the Minutemen. It's the guys who grab the guns from the wall.
Yeah.
With their powder horn and some bullets, and they run out there
Yep.
with their pants on. Maybe.
I normally use this for hunting
I hunt-
wolverines.
yeah, it's. Well, darling, we're going to have to go kill some folk today. Okay. The British send 700 troops from Boston. 400 are already at Lexington, and there's 100 at Concord. So I just picture the 77 guys. Oh no, we did a bad.
We poked a big bear.
Okay, we're out. And then the guys at Concord, oh, we're out. And as they run, though, everybody in the Boston area gets pissed off. And they all, there's a lot of guns because they're hunters. You have to hunt.
No,
There's
yeah.
not a huge police force. The British have already shown they don't care. But a lot of this is like, it's grandpa's flintlock musket. This is not the modern military concept. These guys are not like carrying around the best kit ever. But they're pissed. And they get swarmed by the end of the battle. The British have like 1,500 soldiers that they sent, but the 500 people has swelled to almost 4,000. And the people of Boston just come charging out. The British like, oh no, now it's the shoe's on the other foot.
We've angered
We
all the
made
people.
everybody mad. So by the end of the battle, there's 49 colonists are killed, 39 wounded, 5 missing. 73 British are killed, 174 are wounded, and there's 53 missing.
Oh.
Now, missing usually means dead, or you just went, nope, I'm out of here, I'm deserting. The British are probably never going to be seen again one way or the other because they're going to get found with a knife in a back alley in
Sure.
Boston by, again, a 5-year-old with a sock full of coins or something.
What
What'd you
was
say about the Red Sox?
I bet there's a story of some British fella leaving and then walking through and just changing it up and pretending to have a Boston accent.
Yep. Oh,
"No,
yeah,
I'm from Boston."
I love Harvard Yard.
Ah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you better. So things gone crazy there. And everyone's like, yeah, we won. I mean, and it's a kind of. Like, they won. Again, this is like the first time the colonists have had to fight the British. They see
Yeah.
it as a victory. It's a rallying cry. But they also are able to say, look, they just attacked a bunch of civilians and shot all these people. The British still had a tactical victory because their whole point was to destroy like an artillery depot. They didn't want the colonists to have cannons. They succeeded at that.
Right.
So it's like a tactical, like a strategic win for the Brits, but a tactical and a
Numbers-wise.
moral win for the colonists.
Sure.
So this is the rallying cry. And this happened in, I want to get the date right, April 19th, 1775. So this is the official, like, first battle of the war.
Okay.
Well, now we have to have a Congress to talk
Well,
about this.
let's
We have to figure this
discuss.
out. Let's discuss what's going on. So they have the first Continental Congress, and things have to get disrupted because there's this war going on. So everybody goes home after they have like the first few meetings. Then they have the second Continental Congress starts out. And this is the famous one. This is, they all get together and say, this is bad. The British have basically declared us in a state of rebellion.
Okay.
But right now they just blame Massachusetts. Can we all get on the same team? And this is the first time like all of the colonies have gotten together to talk about stuff. They had the first Continental Congress to go, so stuff's bad, right? Oh yeah, that's really bad.
real bad.
Okay. Now it's the second one. Adams proposes that they have, he's big on having Virginians involved. It's the first colony.
All right.
Plus it's in the middle.
Sure.
And it's
makes
respected by
sense.
the South, it's respected by the North.
Yeah.
A lot of respected people. He's the guy who puts forward one George Washington to be the general. So they're like, yeah, that's a good idea.
Sure,
Good
he's
job,
tall.
John. It's a great idea. He's tall. We can see what he's doing. He's fought in a war.
Yeah.
He's
Fought in 100% of our wars.
He's fought in all of our wars so far. He's done a pretty good job because he's not dead. All right. Plus, he's super duper rich. We like that. He's respected, and he's got that stoic, don't talk to me kind of an attitude.
Sure.
So Washington starts to get an army together. He hates militias. Absolutely hates them. That's why he was big on the whole well-regulated militia bit.
Okay.
That's really important to him because he said to rely on a militia is to rely on a broken staff.
Yeah.
He hated it.
Yeah,
Hated the militias.
it does seem like a bad idea.
No discipline. They got shot at Concord and they run away.
Yeah.
Like he's like, that's stupid. We can't. I mean, we won, but we outnumbered them like 3-1.
Yeah.
That's why we won. It had nothing to do with anything else. There's lots of whoring and drinking, and they're just irresponsible. He hates that. So that's a different story. Then we have Baron von Steuben shows up,
Oh,
our favorite
von
German.
Steuben.
Von Steuben, who we did a whole thing on. He comes in, whips everybody into shape, and yay. But meanwhile, Adams is going, we have to officially have a reason for what's going on. We have to have a list of grievances, because otherwise we're not going to be able to convince all of the colonies.
Right. It's important to have everyone on the same page.
Because we
Wiring.
have three groups of people. We have what are considered the more radicals, who are like, we're done.
Yep.
We're not in Britain anymore. We're out of it. There are the loyalists, who are like, no, we're British and we're staying that way.
Yeah.
And then there are the conservative, like middle group, who don't want anything to change.
Yeah. I bet that's most people.
Yeah, well, yeah. There's a huge amount, but actually, by the end of this, the radical faction is the majority of Americans.
Sure.
They're want out.
Well, after they're
Yeah,
convinced
especially
of it.
after Lexington and Concord. Like people are like, no, they just invaded Boston. They're going to invade us next. We're all going to die. It's interesting because like I always split politics into three types of groups. There's regressives who want to go back to the way things were. So that in this case is the loyalists. There's the conservatives who don't want to change things. They don't want to maintain a status quo. And there's progressives who need to move forward in some way or another. There's change. Our definitions of conservative have changed over the years.
Sure.
Nowadays, that term gets used to describe a lot of things. But really, conservative just means maintaining something.
Yes.
I don't want to change this stuff because I'm very comfortable right now. And at the end of the day, that's where you can get most conservatives go, okay, yeah, so you're conservative. That's fine. The most egregious conservative at this time is a guy named John Dickinson, who's like, I have money and status and I don't want to go anywhere.
I imagine.
I don't want to change it. And he becomes Adams' foil during this
Okay.
war of words. They're like huge rivals. They do not like each other. Adams calls him, what do he say, like quibbling genius?
Ooh.
Like it's like if a baby thought it was smart. That's basically what he called him.
Right.
So they hate each other. Like they would have huge arguments, no respect at all towards each other. Just they hate each other. It's a very Rodney Dangerfield kind of moment. So they have these different factions, and then you have the South. The South is like, we're different. There we are, Langorious gentlemen who sit down here, and we have our own, what do they call it? Peculiar institution. Guess what the peculiar institution was?
That doesn't sound. I mean, it sounds pretty peculiar.
Slavery.
Yeah.
That's how they referred to it. It's the peculiar institution. Not chattel slavery, we own people. Peculiar institution. They are property. And it's a very matter of fact. And the head of this group is a man named Edward Rutledge, who is my least favorite founding father. He is the head of the contingent from South Carolina. He's
What's
from
his name? Rutledge?
Rutledge.
What's his first name?
Edward. They called him Ned. He's born in 1749, so at the Continental Congress, he's 26 years old. He's the youngest guy there by quite a bit. Adams at the time is 41. Franklin is, he's old. He's 70.
70.
He's already 70 now. And that's fine. But the fact that he's 70 at this time, like,
Sure.
he's got gout all the time because he's just easy living and chilling and having, like, he had a huge libido apparently. After his wife died, he just slept with everyone. Women specifically, I believe. There's no proof otherwise, but whatever. He's Franklin. He can sleep with whoever he wants, and they're all fine with it. But Rutledge is kind of the head of the Southern contingent. Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, those are the slave states.
Yes.
That's how they make all their money.
Yeah.
That is big for them. Then Virginia has two very, very famous guys. At the time, they have Thomas Jefferson, who's actually probably worse eventually. But he's considered a diplomat. He's a brilliant writer. Adams even said, you write 10 times better than I do. That was the reason why he said, you're going to write this declaration. You're going to do it. So on June 10th, 1776, they say, we've got to write a thing to convince the rest of the colonies and to convince the world that this is a good cause because we need allies.
Oh, okay.
We're just a little colony.
Right.
I mean, it's 2 million people, but everybody's got their own motives, and so far only Massachusetts has been doing and New York. Those are
And
the two
Britain
that do it.
currently runs everything.
Everything. They have ships that have 100 guns on them. That's and
Lot of
not pew pew, boom cannon,
Boom booms.
boom booms. They sail a couple of those into New York Harbor and it's gone, which they did.
Ooh.
There's a lot of battles that happened in New York. There's probably still cannonballs embedded in some of the old foundations and stuff.
that was
It was brutal fighting. So they're like, well, we gotta do this. We have to also convince the factions. We have to convince the loyalists. Well, good luck with that. We're not going to get them. So there aren't a lot of loyalists. Dickinson is a loyalist. He's very big on England is awesome. We have all these famous family names and all of this history, and aren't you proud to be part of that?
Have you
And
heard
Adams
of
is
England?
like, no, I'm not treated like a citizen. I'm
No.
treated like trash, and I'm tired of it. Dickinson and Franklin are from the same colony,
Okay.
so they are members of the delegation. So
Yeah.
they represent it. And then there's another guy, Judge Wilson. He becomes important. So it's Wilson, Franklin, Dickinson. Those guys.
Bunch of sons.
Yep, lots of sons, and then a one Lynn.
Okay.
And then you have the southern delegates, and then you have like the New England colonies, who typically get along really well. Connecticut, New York
Smaller-
gets thrown in
smaller
there, but they
companies.
usually don't consider New York a New England colony.
Okay.
I honestly don't know where the delineation is.
Sure.
But there's Massachusetts, who
Rhode
are
Island.
considered Rhode Island, Delaware, New Hampshire.
Yeah. Okay.
And they're considered kind of like they're buddies. They get
Yeah.
on well. They have kind of a similar background.
Mm-hmm.
They were colonized in a very similar fashion, similar cultural beliefs and norms, that kind of
Sure.
thing. They don't have slaves. Typically, there are some, but not a lot. So that's a faction. And then there's Virginia. Now, Adams is not liked at all at this point.
Okay.
He has been railing about how they need to have independence. He once said, it's a really great line, I'm going to mess it up, but he said that the fastest way, this is a paraphrase again, but the fastest way to have this whole question sorted out is through powder and artillery.
Well,
That's
that-
the quickest conversation we're going to have.
I mean, he's not wrong.
He's not wrong. He's like, so he goes from, well, maybe we can work things out, and I'm going to defend British soldiers to burn it to the ground, shoot them. He never picks up.
He
a
didn't
musket.
say the best way. He
Yeah,
said the fastest
he said
way.
the fastest way, exactly. So, and what's interesting about Adams is he gets put up as basically the Minister of War.
Oh.
He is so good at organization that he was on 90 committees during his time in the Continental Congress. He worked 18-hour days.
Wow.
So he is he's a pencil pusher equivalent,
Yep.
and he did so much though. If they didn't have Adams, there would be no country because he did all of this work.
Okay.
He and Washington have I think dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of correspondence back and forth, which is again really cool that this time in history they have all this information saved
Sure.
up. So they get this delegation set up. They set up the meeting to have the Declaration written. It's 5 guys. It's Franklin, Adams, Jefferson, and Adams is like the guy who picks Jefferson. He's like, you're doing this.
Yeah.
He's like, we got 5 guys for this, but it's you. Then there's Roger Sherman from Connecticut,
Yep.
and there's Robert Livingston from New York. They're all respected, liked guys, knew they needed a Virginian. They couldn't have Lee. Now, Lee is the guy who proposed to Congress that we have independence. And I'm going to read his proposal because it's kind of hilarious. I know I'm going to run a little over on this one. I'm sorry. Because this, though, is brilliant. It's called the Lee Resolution. I know. This is a big one. All right. So it says, resolved that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is, and ought to be, totally dissolved. That it is expedient forthwith to take the most effectual measures for forming foreign alliances. Go talk to France. That a plan of confederation be prepared and transmitted to the respective colonies for their consideration and approbation. So he says, and this is like, he just goes to Virginia. He's like, I need you guys to say we need to make a country, and that's we need to make a country. And they vote on this, and they're like, we're gonna vote. And Dickinson stands up and says, I vote it needs to be unanimous.
Oh, what a Dickinson move.
And they're like, why? We can't have a unanimous vote. And he's like, well, no colony should be forced to be ripped away from Britain without their consent.
I mean, he does make a good point.
And everyone goes, that's a really good point. And then they're like about to vote on it, and Adam's like, we need to write a declaration of intent.
Yeah.
Before we vote on the thing. You guys need to be knowing what we're voting for.
Sure.
It's a total stalling tactic.
Right.
But it also makes a lot of sense to have this. So that's what causes, that's the big movement. And there's a play built on this called 1776, which is brilliantly researched.
Check
It's
it out.
awesome, awesome, awesome. Lots of information. Almost all of it is derived from public records, the notes written during, like the minutes of the Continental Congress, and a ton of correspondence between Adams and his wife, which is great.
Check it out.
Check it out. So they're writing this. Jefferson gets put in charge of writing the actual thing, and Adams is sitting there going, I want to change this. I like this better. I like this. All right, that's perfect. And since Lee can't be there, he's gone home to Virginia to be the governor.
Gotta
That's,
govern.
they need a Virginian, so they're like, we got to have Jefferson on this because Lee's proposed it. And Lee's like, I'll be back when it needs to be signed. I'm signing this thing. This is awesome.
Thanks, Lee.
They come in and they read the Declaration aloud. Immediately, there are problems.
Oops.
It's like I think it's like June 30th is when they finish it.
Yeah.
They got a couple days left. And they have like 400 word changes where it's little things like there was a reverend who wanted something about divine providence put in. He's like, we
sure.
got to talk about God. And half the founders are like, because contrary to popular belief, they're not all like devout Christians. Jefferson was a deist who believed like he's basically an agnostic. Adams was not particularly religious. Franklin was not religious. Perhaps ironically, a lot of the Southerners were religious, but they owned people. Interesting.
I mean, there is.
There's stuff
Slavery
about
is in
slavery in
the-
the Bible,
yeah.
but no. So there's some changes made to it, and there's a passage that discusses how King George has waged cruel war on a people not from this country. It's a slavery passage.
Oh.
And Rutledge says, "Well, what do you mean? What are you talking about? What's the
we-
problem with that?"
what's,
He says, "Well, we these are people that are owned." He's like, "They're not people; they're property."
Oh, dang.
That's a huge, yeah. You guys might not understand it in the North, but that's a huge thing in the South for us. And they're like, well, it's stupid to own people. And Adams gets really fired up about this, and Rutledge in the South are like, all right, here's the deal. You get rid of that clause, or we're voting it down. And we will stay part of Britain forever.
Interesting.
But you cannot change our way of life. And they're like, well, you guys in the South, you own people. It's like, who brings us the slaves on the ships?
Oh, dang.
Starts in Boston. It's the triangle trade. It's molasses to rum to slaves. So it starts in Boston. They go down to Antigua and the Caribbean. They pick up the molasses. They convert it into. Well, I think it starts there. They go to Boston, convert it to rum, bring the rum over to the Ivory Coast, trade that for slaves, bring the slaves back to Boston. It's this whole scheme.
So they call them out being hypocrites.
Call them out for being hypocrites. Now, Adams has nothing to do with this trade.
Yep.
And the people, it's kind of like saying, well, you provide, a service for us to meet our demand, so you're just as bad as we are. It's like, well, not really, but also it is pretty
But
bad. Yeah. So eventually Rutledge has his way. You guys will let us have slaves. We're going to own people or there will be no independence. It causes a bit of a rift between Adams and Franklin because Franklin's like, we got to do it. And Adams is like, but it's so stupid. And it's funny, too, because Jefferson's talking about freeing the slaves. He has a lot of slaves. Like, a lot.
Was he going to free them?
He said he was going to.
Okay.
But he maybe knew he wouldn't have to if it got shouted out. Like, because he never did.
Yeah. Oh,
He did after he died.
That
But
doesn't-
after
that doesn't
he
really count at
slept
all.
with many of his slaves and then enslaved the children of those unions.
but also doing things after you're
Pretty
dead. It's
awful
really,
guy.
that
Yeah,
doesn't count.
that doesn't count. It's like, well, I'm not getting a benefit from this anymore, so free the slaves. So anyway, they have to bend on this, and they're like, we'll fix it later.
Whoops. We'll fix it in a
We have to have,
years,
we have, to
100
have
years
a
or so.
country first. They thought they would resolve it when they actually laid the foundations of the country.
Sure.
So they do make the change. They cut out this whole passage, and then they have the final form. Now on July 2nd is when they say, "All right, yep, we all agree to this." But here's the thing: Dickinson strongly opposes independence still, and he is one of the delegates. So he almost kills this whole thing. They have to have what's called a poll where they split the delegation, and each delegate votes to decide which way the actual delegation is going to vote.
Yeah.
Now, at the time, Judge Wilson is like best friends with Dickinson, and he's largely considered to be kind of a feckless, useless guy
Okay.
who never really makes a decision. He never stands out.
Feckless.
And then there's Franklin, who's super pro-independence. Somehow he either manages to convince Wilson or Wilson bends and or sees that this has to happen, and they vote Dickinson down and support independence. So it almost didn't happen because Dickinson's like, nope, Britain's great.
What a Dickinson move.
Here's what's crazy. In like protest or in acceptance or whatever, Dickinson leaves Congress and joins the Continental Army in service to the United States to fight against Britain. He's like, fine, since we have established that we are a country, I'm going to put my money where your mouth is and fight for her. Because I do believe in this colony, I do believe in this country. It's wild. Like, he goes from, we need to be part of Britain to, all right, I'm going to go and enlist in the army. And they're like, what? And he gets like a standing ovation. Like, oh,
go
yeah,
ahead, I
go.
guess.
I don't know what's going on, but
right.
go you. And Adams is like, he says something about it, like publicly. He's like, that was really cool. I don't know why you did it, but all right, dude. So this all, on July 2nd, they vote to pass it. Now, the reason why you celebrate it on the 4th is because it wasn't fully ratified with the final print until then. But they had the signatures. Lee comes back from Virginia, puts his name on it. There's the John Hancock, the huge thing. Now, he was the president of the Continental Congress. He said he wrote it so that Fat George could see it without his glasses.
Yeah, that's good.
Again, they don't like George. Now, a little bit of a follow-up to this is, the war goes on until 1783.
Yeah.
So during this time, the signatories of the Declaration are traitors.
Yeah.
Treason is only, Franklin talks about this, of treason is a punishment by the winners as an excuse for hanging the losers.
Yeah.
So,
It is.
and he's like, and it's all about perspective, right? Treason's only illegal when it's their rebellion, but it's perfectly legal when it's our rebellion.
It's tricky, right?
It's tricky.
You
And
better, if
they
you're
have
gonna do
that
treason,
whole,
if you're gonna do
like,
treason, you better
we
win.
must hang together or will most assuredly hang separately, that
Yeah.
kind of a thing. But like Philadelphia, where they sign it, gets invaded at one point, so they have to flee. Like, every member of the Congress is like hunted down. Rutledge gets caught by the British when Charleston gets invaded, and he fights against the British. He's like in an artillery unit. He gets captured. He's exchanged as a prisoner release thing, and then goes on to the Continental Congress with a sole goal when we actually write the Constitution. Nobody else really has like an agenda at the Constitutional Congress when the convention, when they get together. Rutledge comes in with the entire South and says, we will keep slavery. No matter what.
Yeah.
No matter what happens, we will not bend on that. And nobody takes them to task. Nobody has the stones to say, fine, make your own little country. See what happens. So because
I imagine they're just too tired.
they were tired of war. They were like, but they thought they could fix it sooner. It's like they thought he would bend. He didn't bend. He was waiting for this for like 10 years. And he got a band of guys together and had the entire South, which is only 3 colonies at this time, united in this idea that we're going to own people forever. Forever. That's the plan.
Yeah.
And they marched in with that plan. And because the rest of the colonies didn't get together and say, no, we got to stop this, they just let it happen. Which really sucks, because then, less than a century later, we have our war with ourselves to stop owning people.
And since then, it's all cleared up.
It's been fine ever since. It's been totally fine ever since. So,
all right, well, time to wrap up.
Yep, time to wrap up. So, 1776, July 4th, the Declaration of Independence is signed, and I'm just going to read part of it because I was going to read the whole thing, but it's long.
Yeah.
All right, but the preamble is they have it split into they have the introduction, the preamble, the indictment, which is like their list of grievances. I think it's 27. This is why the king sucks. It's really bad. Like he has refused his assent to laws that is most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He's forbidden his governors to pass laws. He's refused to pass other laws. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant. He has dissolved representative houses. He has refused for a long time to cause others to be elected. Like, it just goes on and on and on and on.
We got a lot of problems.
This guy sucks. Then it's like, we told him we don't like this. They call this the failed warning section. It's like,
Oh.
we have come on and said, dude, stop. This is horrible, and you're making life worse for everybody, and your people are in pain, and they didn't care. And then there's the denunciation that says, we must therefore acquiesce in the necessity, which denounces our separation, and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war and in peace friends. So it's like, nobody listens to us, so our fellow British people are no longer our fellows. We're at war now. You guys could have changed things.
Yeah, we warned you.
You chose not to.
Now here's a paper really warning you.
And then the conclusion is that they're going to do it. So I'll read the beginning bit because it's a very cool piece. But it's like, this is very flowery, old school, right?
Yeah.
It says, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. So this is when they start calling them states. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. This is why we're breaking up with you. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prejudice indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Pretty awesome statement. Basically says, it's understandable if laws are inconvenient, things suck for a little bit, but when it's intolerable and people are dying and people are being hurt and this is very clearly not changeable through the rules, we've got to change the rules. We've got to change the government.
Not only do we want to, we have
it's
to.
required.
We need
It
to.
is your duty. It is your responsibility. So this is why, like, this sets up the perfect argument of, if you are not happy about things, you don't complain if you aren't trying to change it. Get out and vote. Speak your mind, say your piece. But just because things don't necessarily go your way is no reason to say, well, we got to burn the government to the ground. It's right there. Like, they even wrote it. Like, yeah, complain about it, change it, abolish it. If it's interminable, and not just for you, but for the system just is broken irreparably, then it needs to be broken down and changed. And Jefferson used to say, there needs to be a change of thinking or like a revolution of some kind every generation, whether it's a cultural one, a government one, or a violent one. Now, hopefully you get your problems resolved. But it's a really fascinating groundwork of this is what our country's all about. And sometimes along the way it feels like it might be forgotten. But we can see every time something gets changed, it's because it became like an insufferable thing. It was not a, well, this is inconvenient, let's burn it to the ground. But also anybody who says, like, well, if you don't like the country, leave, completely misses the point of the country. It's, no, if you don't like it, you change it.
Right.
You work to change it.
Yeah.
That's what we're literally all about.
We're a work in progress.
They didn't like the country as it was, so they made one, and they changed it. And that's the beauty of, and this is the first time a colony threw off the yoke of the rulership and said, we're our own place.
Huh.
It was not the first successful revolution or rebellion, but it's the first time a colony said, nope, we're our own thing. And it's amazing. And so they've always referred to it as like the American experiment. Now, we've had our highs and our lows. We've had horrible things happen within the history of our country. We've owned people, committed genocide. We're pretty close to it. Wars, sometimes on the right side, sometimes just for profit. And we have to look at all of that. But this founding document is like the bedrock that that's built on. And it's brilliant. It's beautiful. And that's what the 4th of July is all about, folks.
Still a work in progress.
Still a work in progress. Nothing. See, they even changed it then. Everything is changeable. So the Constitution, we have amendments to change things. We can always change things. It's right there. It says in the first thing. Change it.
All right. If you have any
That's
thoughts or comments on this, please leave the comments in below.
Yeah.
So like and subscribe to the video.
Yep, share it.
Share it
on
all
the
around.
interwebs.
And next week we're going to be discussing the founding of Dublin,
Founding of Dublin, Ireland.
Ireland.
Going back to the Emerald Isle.
988.
July 10th.
July 10th. So thanks for watching. Thanks for enjoying.
Thanks, guys.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Goodbye.